So I have AI writing some microfiction for me, but some of them get rejected for content. Here is a list of ones that will definitely not be appearing in my reading program. The Last Transmission. The storm wasn't natural. Harold had known that for 30 years. His hands shook as he pried open the lighthouse door, the hinges groaning like an old man's bones. Inside, the air smelled of salt and ozone, thick with the hum of machinery buried deep in the stone. The government had called it decommissioned, but Harold had spent his career tracking the impossible hurricanes that stalled like parked cars, blizzards that dissolved mid-sky. Someone was pulling the strings, and tonight he'd cut them. The control panel was just as he'd imagined, dials labeled in code, a flickering screen mapping global wind currents in real time. His gloved fingers hovered over the master switch. One flip and the lies would burn with the circuits. Then the light turned on. "Dad?" Harold spun. The woman in the doorway wore a technician's jumpsuit, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes the same storm gray as his. "Lena?" His daughter, no, Dr. Elena Vasquez, according to the ID badge clipped to her chest, stepped forward, blocking the console. "You weren't supposed to find this. You're running it," his voice cracked. "You're the one doing this." She didn't deny it, not by choice. They blackmailed me after the paper I published on geoengineering. Said if I didn't comply, they'd disappear me and you. Her fingers twitched toward the screen, where a swirling red mass, his storm, expanded over the coast. "You just triggered the failsafe. That hurricane's going to hit Portland in 6 hours. Harold's stomach dropped. "Fix it." "I can't alone." She grabbed his wrist, her grip desperate. "The system's locked. I need your old access codes, the ones from the '98 satellite breach, please." The codes he'd stolen, the ones that had gotten him fired. He hesitated. 3 decades of rage, of being called a conspiracy theorist, a crank. But Lena's face was 12 years old again, begging him to teach her how clouds worked. Harold exhaled. "All right, kid, let's save the world." Together, they bent over the console, fingers flying. Outside, the wind howled, but for the first time in years, Harold knew it was just the wind. The crack in the mirror split Mia's reflection, and her vanity could not look away. She heard a floorboard creak in the hallway, but she was too busy fixing her hair. A shadow moved behind her in the glass, but she only saw the flaw in her own image. The last thing she understood was that the intruder was not there for her possessions, but for her. The case felt wrong to Clara. When the door to the evidence room clicked locked behind her, she knew why. Her own team had set a trap, leaving a gun on the table where it did not belong. These were not her partners. They were traitors. Clara picked up the weapon, her mind already working on a new plan. Leo found an old mirror at a flea market and hung it in his dark hallway. Every time he passed it, his reflection moved a little slower, like a shadow trying to catch up. One morning, as he walked by, his reflection suddenly stopped and turned its head to stare at him. Its lips curled into a slow, terrifying smile that didn't match his own face. Leo froze, but the reflection raised a hand and waved before the glass cracked into 1,000 pieces. When he looked down, shards of the mirror cut into his shoes, warm and wet with something that wasn't just blood. The cold metal chair dug into Tom's back. His captor smiled and said, "Your friend Ben told us everything." Tom felt a deep, cold hurt at this betrayal. He remembered Ben's promise to always watch his back. Now, he knew that promise was a lie, and his unit was in danger. Marcus moved into his new apartment and found the basement door slightly open, a dim light flickering inside. Curious, he stepped in and saw walls covered in old photographs, dozens of faces staring back at him, all labeled with names and dates. His stomach twisted as he noticed his own picture already there, taken just yesterday, with the words "New Tenant, Marcus" scribbled beneath it. The landlord's voice echoed from behind him, too cheerful. "Oh, good! You found my little collection. Isn't it creepy how time passes so fast?" Marcus ran upstairs, but the next morning, another photo appeared on his kitchen table, this time of him sleeping. He knew he had to leave before he became just another face on that wall. Tomas was enjoying the town festival when he turned and saw a face in a car window. The cold, smiling eyes of the murderer from last week's news. His heart pounded as the man glanced around, and Tomas quickly stepped back into the crowd. Pushing through dancing children and laughing families, he searched for a police officer. Just as he spotted one near the food stalls, he turned to point, but the murderer was gone. Tomas grabbed the officer's arm, gasping, "I saw him, right there!" The officer's radio crackled as the chase began. Marcus stared at his reflection as it raised its hand without him moving. His heart pounded. His self's shadowy twin smiled when he didn't. That night, he set up a camera and watched the footage in horror. For years, his body had wandered the house while he slept. The mirror's version showed him the truth. It wasn't a reflection, but the part of him that walked alone. He locked the mirror in the closet, but the next morning, his shoes were muddy again. Some secrets, he realized, never stay buried. Sarah was cleaning her attic when she found a dusty box labeled State vs. Marcus Cole, a case she had prosecuted 20 years ago. As she read the old file, her hands trembled. A key witness had lied, and she had never noticed. The real killer's name was scribbled in the margin, but the prosecutor she once was had missed it. Now retired, she spent weeks digging for new evidence, her guilt growing with each clue. When she finally proved Marcus was innocent, she sat in the empty courtroom, whispering, "I'm sorry." The next morning, she mailed the files to the governor, hoping it wasn't too late for justice. The Stormmaker's Lament. The lighthouse beam cut through the storm like a scalpel, and Dr. Elias Voss knew this was the source. For years, he tracked the unnatural patterns, the storms that bent to unseen hands. Now, standing in the abandoned tower's rusted control room, he grinned at the humming console, its dials glowing with stolen thunder. His fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power, severing connections. The storm outside howled in protest, winds whipping the sea into a frenzy. Let them see the chaos they've hidden, he thought. Then the door creaked open. "Dad?" Elias spun. His daughter Lila stood in the doorway, her face gaunt, her hands trembling. "You didn't think it was them," she said. "It was me." The console's lights flickered. The storm outside surged, waves crashing against the cliffs with unnatural force. "I didn't have a choice," Lila whispered. "They threatened you. Mom, everyone. I was just supposed to maintain it." Elias's hands stilled. The truth settled over him like the first drop of rain. "Then help me fix it." Lila exhaled, stepping forward. Together, they worked, fingers flying over the controls, coaxing the storm back into balance. The winds softened. The sea stilled. When the last dial settled, Lila turned to him, her eyes wet. "We have to run." Elias nodded. The world would come for them now. But for the first time in years, the sky was theirs to share. James opened the plain white envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "You convicted the wrong man," it read, signed only with a smudged fingerprint. His hands shook as he remembered the old case, the one that made him a respected prosecutor, the one that still haunted his dreams. The letter listed a hidden witness, a name he had never heard before, and a time. Midnight at the bridge, or the truth dies with me. That night, James stood under the flickering streetlight, gripping the letter, wondering if justice had ever really been served. When a shadow stepped forward, he held his breath, afraid of what the stranger might say. The last reader. The first note was a dare. Martha pressed the scrap of paper into the crack of a bus stop bench, her fingers trembling. "Do you remember how to read?" she had written, in careful, looping script. She lingered, watching the morning crowd shuffle past, their eyes sliding over the words as if they were invisible. For 3 days, no one touched it. On the fourth, a woman in a gray coat paused. Her fingers hovered over the paper, then curled into a fist. She glanced around before tucking it into her pocket. Martha's breath caught. She left another note at the grocery store, then the park, each one a whisper of defiance. The responses came in silence, nodded acknowledgments, quick glances. A single tear slipped down a stranger's cheek. They weren't illiterate. They were waiting. Then the black vans arrived. Martha saw them first, rolling through the streets like shadows. She ducked into an alley, heart pounding, as the soldiers in crisp uniforms swept through the square, tearing down posters, confiscating books. A child's voice rose in protest before being silenced. That night, she wrote her final note and slipped it under the door of the nearest house. We are not alone. The next morning, the streets were empty, but in every window, a single candle burned. Leo checked the museum doors and turned on the lights, but something felt wrong. He walked through the quiet rooms until he saw the empty space on the wall. The painting of the soldier, armed for battle, was gone. His hands shook as he called his boss, who told him nothing else was missing. That night, Leo heard footsteps in the dark and turned to see the soldier from the painting standing behind him, sword in hand. "You took too long," the soldier whispered, before fading into the shadows. Leo never returned to work after that. Leo found the hidden closet on his first day in the apartment. Inside was an infinite number of identical notebooks. Every page in every book showed his own handwriting saying, "Do not open the next door." His hand shook as he reached for the closet's back wall, feeling for a handle. He knew, with a cold certainty, that he was going to open it. The last reader. Margaret Sharp had spent 63 years surrounded by books, and now she was the only one left who could read them. The streets were quiet, not the hush of a sleeping city, but the heavy silence of a world that had forgotten language. Billboards flashed bright symbols, news screens scrolled emoji headlines, and the few people she passed communicated in grunts, gestures, or the occasional synthesized chirp from their wristbands. The great literacy ban had worked. Words were illegal now, and with them, history, dissent, even memory. Margaret couldn't let it die. Every Tuesday, she ventured out with her satchel of handwritten notes, careful block letters on yellowed paper, tucked into bus seats, taped to lampposts, left on cafe tables. The sky is blue, not #47B3E6. You are not alone. They cannot erase what you carry in your mind. She never stayed to watch. The surveillance drones would spot her if she lingered, and the penalty for written words was memory wiping, or worse. Then, one evening, she found a reply. A scrap of paper, folded beneath the bench where she'd left her latest note. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. "We see you. We remember. Meet us at the old library, midnight. Burn this." Margaret's breath caught. The old library had been boarded up years ago, its books pulped for recycling. But when she pressed her palm against the back door that night, it swung open. Inside, candlelight flickered over rows of faces, young, old, weary, defiant. Shelves that should have been empty still held books, hidden behind false panels. A woman with silver streaked hair touched Margaret's sleeve and pressed a volume into her hands. "We've been waiting for someone brave enough to write back." Margaret opened the book. The pages were filled not just with stories, but with names, hundreds of them, all who had kept the rebellion alive in silence. She wasn't the last reader after all. She was the first to hear them speak. David had always dreamed of a family portrait, so after years of saving, he finally had enough money to commission one. The artist worked for months, and when the painting arrived, David hung it proudly in the living room. Every evening, his wife and children would gather to admire it, smiling at their frozen faces on the canvas. But one morning, David noticed something strange. The eyes in the painting seemed to follow him as he moved. He laughed it off until the night he woke to whispers coming from the frame, calling his name in voices that sounded just like his family. Now, the portrait watches them all, and no one dares to look too long. David spent nights fooling his friends by pretending to see ghosts in the old house. They laughed and left the lights on when they went home. One night, David went alone to the house to do it again. He pushed the old door and heard a soft voice call his name. He laughed at first and thought it was a trick. Then the thing in the dark opened its eyes and reached for him. Elena's hand shook as she followed the young man through the dark alley, her fangs aching with hunger. Months without blood had left her weak, her vision blurry. But tonight, she would feed. She had to. She reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve, but then she saw his face, kind, tired, humming a soft tune as he walked home. Her stomach twisted and she pulled back, her thirst suddenly less important than the memory of her own lost humanity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her, before vanishing into the shadows, still a vampire, but no longer a monster. The night swallowed her as she wondered how long she could survive like this.